Next topic. 4 people died today of a drug overdose. 4 will likely die tomorrow and the next day, adding to the list of over 10,000 preventable deaths. Half of them employed, most young dying alone. The overdose crisis and the downtown east side are related. As we speak, there are hundreds of people sleeping in the cold and the rain tonight. Many of them are in full-blown mental illness with serious physical ailments. We have 3 speakers tonight who all agree that we desperately need a new approach. We seem unable to solve this problem. The global civic think tank is committed to finding a way to end this scourge. The next presentation has photos taken by antiquarian Robert McNutt. Our next speaker was the City of Vancouver's homelessness advocate. She clearly didn't understand what was expected of her, as she insisted on talking with actual homeless people where they were. Others thought she should stay in the office. They said if she wanted to speak with homeless people, she would have to do that on her own time. So she worked at the city by day and walked through the alleys, meeting and helping people by night. I remember city councilors would call her Saint Judy. They were dead serious. Hundreds of people owe their well-being and even their lives to her. Please welcome Judy Graves.
I want to talk to you about the downtown east side tonight. Now, you see a lot of homeless people in the pictures that we took. Most of these pictures were taken by my friend Robert McNutt, who I think is here tonight. The downtown east side has been occupied since the first sunrise. And it was occupied not by people living in cheap synthetic tents. It was occupied not in constant chaos. It was occupied by a nation of very wise people who lived in long cedar houses with their extended families and went camping in the summer. It was occupied by people with a highly structured society, and it was occupied in great happiness. In the pictures that we're showing tonight, you'll see no happiness. You see no structured society. You see no long cedar houses. You see no extended family. Homelessness came with colonialism. Homelessness has been a struggle off and on with the city of Vancouver since before the Great Fire. And you know, by the 1980s, we pretty much aced it. So anybody here who is over 60, show of hands? You'll remember when you'd go downtown, you'd never see anybody on Robson Street sleeping out. You wouldn't see people huddled against the bay at night. You would not see people panhandling all over the city. What happened, right? Well, when we remember the 1980s, we'll remember that Vancouver was covered with tiny Victorian houses, small rooms inside them, and you couldn't go down a block anywhere in Vancouver without seeing 2 room for rent signs. And the rooms rented for about 1/4 of minimum wage. So everybody was housed. If you got in trouble with your landlady, you walked down the block and you'd rent another room. It was all fine. And then in the 1990s, the federal government cut funding for subsidized housing. And that meant that as our city grew, people displaced into cheaper and cheaper housing, but there was less cheap housing to displace into. After the expo, the price of land shot up, and renting a rooming house was no longer the best economic use of those rooms. And so people were evicted, and that's when we began to see homelessness. The houses were either gentrified or torn down to build apartment buildings. And there was no more place for people to live inside. The process took about 10 years, but by the year 2000, it was virtually impossible to find affordable housing for someone who was on minimum wage or who was on welfare or disability benefits anywhere in the city of Vancouver, with the exception of the downtown east side. And at that time, the buildings, which were about 1/3 tenanted, began to fill up. Within 10 years, it was hard to find 5 rooms to rent in the whole downtown east side. And because there was nothing to rent, we began to find more and more and more people living outside. In the year 2000, in the downtown east side, surrounding Woodwards, we had our first tent city. You remember Wood Squat? And from the downtown east side, it's the tent cities stretched out, up Cambie, over into Strathcona, a little bit further east onto the waterfront, one after another. And people just continue to have been displaced. So what we're seeing in these pictures is the so-called tent city that has developed along East Hastings. The pictures were taken from about the first week of May through, I think, the first week of October, as the tents ebbed and flowed, as the criminal activity built, as the police took guns, as there was an incident with a crossbow. These are not things that are associated with homelessness. This is a complete lawlessness. This is a gang involvement. And what is the solution? Along Hastings, we'll see among the chop shops, some of the most vulnerable people in Vancouver actually living soaking wet tonight in tents. They need protection. There is no compassion in leaving people out on the street. What do we need to do? We need to bring virtually everybody who is homeless in. Get them inside, get them sheltered, and then house them. A city can't live like this. We need to return to the origins of Vancouver.